Hello YouTube, this is Morgan, Airspeed Prime, here at my next Airspeed's Korra Rewatch video. This one's going to be for K310, Long Live the Earth Queen. And yeah, this is, I think, one of the more memorable episodes from the book, but the question of course is, it's memorable for at least one scene, but does that make it one of the best episodes from the book? And in my opinion, not really. I think it is a good episode. I think it's on the better end of things, this book, but everything combined in this episode I don't think makes for the greatest episode of Korra. Of course, the death of the Earth Queen is a really big moment in terms of like the impact that it has and how it takes place for what this show is and so on. We'll get into it. So in that sense, it's memorable. I just think, like, on the character side of things, like, you don't really necessarily care as much about the Earth Queen, in that, like, I think Raiko being killed, more or less any other world leader would have, it would have been a little bit more meaningful if it was any other world leader except her, just because of how they went about presenting her. But it does get across the Red Lotus very well. So let's talk about this. I suppose we'll start off with the kind of lighter side of the episode, the less important side. That is Korra and Asami kidnapped by the Earth Queen's forces. So we find out that, okay, they were held in this outpost, like Fort Bosco, I think they called it, which was pretty fun. They're then transported via airship to Ba Sing Se, but along the way, Korra and Asami escape. And the result is that they crash in the Siwang Desert and have to work together with the crew of the airship to basically either repair the airship and then later build a sand sailor to get out, avoiding this spirit that is kind of inhabiting the desert. It's definitely a plot that's, like, interesting. I think on the outset there's some, like, cool stuff that happens, there's some cool action. I just think they really missed an opportunity to kind of get some character out here. With Asami, like, you get to see her engineering skills, which we always know, that's the one thing they always get across. But I think this was a real opportunity to actually develop Korra and Asami's relationship, because they're together for most of this episode and they're working together, but there's no real substance to what they're, like, saying to each other. Like, there's no real development that gets across that there's a special connection between the two, in that if you replaced Asami in this episode with kind of any other character who had engineering skills, this episode would have worked the exact same way. There was nothing really significant about, like, Korra's interaction with Asami here. And I think that's where, when it comes down to the discussion of, like, Korra-Asami development, where did it happen? Most of book 3, I don't think there's really any. And when was the last time I really mentioned it? Like very early episodes, like episode 1 or 2, the scene of them in the car there's a little bit of substance to that one. Not quite romance, especially this episode. Like, is there anything that they specifically say to each other here that's anything particularly interesting? Not really. It's just the standard, we're friends, we're working together on this. Korra knows where Asami's strengths are, Asami knows where Korra's strengths are. That's really it. Given that we're ultimately building to try and get to romance, there really hasn't been that scene to kind of get that, like, spark across just yet, that there is something there that we're kind of building towards. In that they, at this point, haven't really even gotten across that there is any sort of, like, Korra and Asami are, like, best friends even. They're just part of the same friend group, and this book is trying to emphasize that they're a little closer than you maybe thought before. But even that's not being gotten across particularly well, just because, again, I think it's the mistake of, like, just because the two characters are next to each other in a lot of scenes doesn't mean that they necessarily have developed their relationship. It's just they've spent time next to each other. And then, like, I think the resolution to this, like, it's fun. Like, it's in the Siwang Desert, which we've been before. Sand sailors, sand benders, spirits now part of the desert. It's all some pretty cool stuff, just with the visuals going on here, and Asami being very kind of clever putting all this stuff together. I don't think it has the best resolution, because at the end of the day, this giant spirit shark thing that's chasing after them, it's so anticlimactic when the big attack finally comes in, and all it is that, like, they fall a little bit into its mouth, Korra firebends them out to kind of give them like a boost to kind of come back, combined with the fact that I suppose she's injured it to a degree, and that's it. Like, did I want them to go like full like Avatar state, do a big fight? Not necessarily, but maybe like a bit of a kind of proper, you know, chase action scene where like the whole crew gets a chance to shine, and maybe you get to see maybe some of the bigger kind of more focused trust between Korra and Asami. But just the way it was just kind of like, okay, you could have used the time here better. They spent a little bit too much time getting all this happening in that, okay, let's repair the airship. Oh, the shark thing breaks the airship as it's repaired, which sort of makes the time spent before they started the Sand Sailor feel a little bit kind of wasted, because you just spent some time repairing just to break it again. And the result of this is that it leads to Korra and Asami getting out of the desert with the whole crew. Everyone survives. They meet up with Tonraq, Lin, and Zuko, and they find out about what's happened in the other side of the plot with the death of the Earth Queen, and, you know, catching up with what's happened, that Mako and Bolin have been captured, just getting everyone up to speed on what every other group is doing, more or less. Cool to see Druk again, getting to see Korra and Zuko meet for the first time here in the series, and just establishing that they met when Korra was much younger, but it's still a fun scene because like Zuko and Aang, here's Zuko and Korra now, and just to see that actually happening. And you know, it's some of the plots coming together. Like Zuko hasn't been in the show for a little bit. We knew that he was kind of more or less with Tonraq last time we saw him. Now they're here. They obviously met up with Lin, who had kind of tracked down roughly where Korra and everyone were. The only other thing would be that little bit of character stuff with the fact that Korra and Asami do get across to the crew of the airship that they aren't anyone to like really heavily treat as prisoners. That there is a trust that develops between Korra and Asami and the crew, when previously it was, you are our prisoners, and they end up helping that group get out of the desert so much that it you know, turns it around and just kind of shows them kind of coming across well to other people. Nothing really substantial, but just nice kind of little, just in terms of like writing the characters to be kind of likable in a way, and their skills making them kind of come across well to other people. But it's not the most interesting part of the episode, just because there's no real takeaway except for the fact that it's like 7 or so minutes of the episode where we get Korra and Asami from being captured to being back with you know, friends basically. I suppose let's cover we after this we're pretty much getting into like Red Lotus stuff and what's going on there, and that's when it sort of splits up into Mako Bolin and the Red Lotus. I really do like the scene of Mako and Bolin in the back of the van talking to like Minghua and Ghazan, because this is an example. This is the prime example of like, why weren't you doing this in previous episodes with the Red Lotus? Ghazan, I think, comes across really well in this scene, just with a couple of lines of dialogue. He seems like a really kind of cool, chill, kind of relaxed guy who isn't overly serious. You sort of get across, you know, like why they kind of believe in freedom, just with regards to the fact that they were imprisoned previously. But again, the question it doesn't really resolve is that like they were part of the Red Lotus prior to being imprisoned. Of course, given that they believe so heavily in freedom, they wouldn't like being in prison. But what was the freedom about before this? But yeah, you see how kind of relaxed and kind of chill Ghazan is, and then you see how kind of Minghua has a little bit of a kind of I suppose kind of humor. There's a lighter side to her personality of just her coming up with all this gossip about the guards when she was imprisoned. You know, it kind of leads into the bit of character that you have with her before, that she's perfectly fine with kind of speaking her mind, making some kind of snippy comments. And then just things like Bolin saying 3 things about Ghazan and him confirming that 2 out of 3 of them are correct. What was one of them? His mustache grew in at 10, which was, I suppose, more of the jokey one, but could make sense for Ghazan. Raised by an older sister, that could be a cool story. and the other one was unspoken attraction between Minghua and Gazan, and they kind of look at each other like maybe it's true. So it's kind of hard to really predict. Like, if you take the two serious ones as a fact, and that, like, okay, that means that Gazan had a, you know, not perfect upbringing. Something happened to his parents, was raised by his older sister. What happened to his older sister? The tattoos, you know, what part of the Earth Kingdom is he from? How does lava bending incorporate into that? There's the potential for story there. He mentions like looking up at the stars a little bit, just showing you that they are actually still people. They're not just villains 24/7 that, you know, as much as they did all this kind of bad stuff and deserve to be in prison, you know, it's just them dealing with the fact that, like, it was boring being in prison for that long. Similarly with Minghua, with the kind of water and like her kind of wishes and all she could do to sort of entertain herself in this situation. That's fine. It's just like, this is like the only scene where you really kind of humanize the characters in a way, given that they're part of such an extreme organization and like what the group is about to do kind of later on in the episode. Similarly, I suppose, a little bit of like when they're with the Earth Queen and they're put into that like waiting room more or less, and you just see like Pali kind of relax, kind of sprawled out with the drink in her hand, and they're just kind of acting like normal people and not like villains 24/7. Use that a little bit more. Like that's what I think was really missing from the villains. And it's not just that, like, I think they did nothing with them. It's that there is potential here with their characters, but they didn't do much beyond this. And that's always been the weakness with Book 3 for me. You see in this episode how skilled they are, but just the lack of character really takes away from what they could be. So let's cover the Mako Bolin stuff here before we get into the big part of the episode. You basically just see them in prison, a little bit of interaction with the other prisoners to see what's going on. So you can sort of get the impression that a lot of people in prison here with them were just put in prison on random whims of the Earth Queen for not really doing much. So it's not really overly just what's going on here, which I suppose is potentially why the Red Lotus don't mind releasing everyone. But the core of more or less what happens here is getting across that Mako feels that Bolin can get them out by finally making that connection and metal bending for the first time. And it's about trying to give Bolin the confidence. They get a chant going. It doesn't work. You see Bolin very, very down. Right before everyone is released, you think they're finally going to commit to it, that like this last-ditch effort, they're finally going to, you know, make it happen. Still doesn't work, and it's like, what are you doing here? Like, you're building it up like metal bending, metal bending, metal bending. You're really getting it across that like it's going to be this big moment when he finally does it. And I think the big thing as they went into this, and I think they do it at least once more, I think they teased the metal bending. The big thing was, they've done this enough times. Is the scene where they finally do it going to pay off enough to be worth all these sort of failed attempts? Obviously, where they go with it, it works 100% because they go even bigger than metal bending. They give him lava bending, and that's just even more impressive. But we'll get to that. But the core here is just that they can't quite get out, and Mako's forced to try and very slowly cut through the bars. You see he's gotten through one, but not anymore. So, you know, that was a, you know, somewhat interesting kind of little section of the episode. You know, Mako earlier on was very much heavily asking him the questions, you know, what are you going to do once you get Korra? But they weren't answering his questions. Clearly, he was asking the right questions. He just wasn't going to get a response from that. Obviously, like, the next section of the episode is the Red Lotus, and it's interesting because, like, they obviously have established already that they hate world leaders, but here's Zahir coming in and at least trying to kind of play into the Earth Queen's sort of how high she thinks of herself by calling her Your Majesty, even though I'm sure Zahir hated doing that, but trying to please her, do exactly what she wants, and I suppose try and get through this situation without needing to go overboard, like expose the group for what they actually are. And it seems like it's working, but then you immediately see that the Earth Queen is kind of planning to kind of go against the deal. She doesn't have complete control about what's happening with Korra, as there obviously the airship has crashed. And it's basically just that they managed to get this deal, more or less, where the Earth Queen can get rid of all the threat from basically the other nations by basically getting rid of Korra. She's pretty confident that this group is going to get rid of Korra from her life as well, but it's not going to reflect badly on the Earth Kingdom's position in the world, which I actually liked that was brought up, because you're like, the Earth Queen was kind of threatening Korra with the idea of, you going against the Earth Kingdom, you are going to war with the Earth Kingdom, but it's also like, but Hu Ting, you haven't thought about what you trying to capture the Avatar, or you going against what the Avatar is doing, is going to mean for the Earth Kingdom. And Zahir kind of playing the Earth Queen in that way. He is more intelligent than her, but obviously her mistake is feeling that she has all the power and really not respecting or really seeing what Zahir has, and obviously planning to keep everything from him. She doesn't have the Avatar, and this is obviously where the big scene goes down. They break in, they take out all the Dai Li very quickly. There's no chance for the Dai Li. Once again, getting across how powerful the Red Lotus as a group are, able to take out Dai Li with complete ease. And then the big thing happens. Zahir kills the Earth Queen by suffocation using airbending. It's definitely a big kind of monumentous scene. It doesn't have as much impact for me because I knew before this episode, I suppose before Korra even started, I knew that this was a technique that airbenders can do, the suffocation technique. I knew from the Avatar trading card game that this was a thing that is possible. So for me, Zahir doing this wasn't the debut of this technique as such. It was just our first time in animation seeing it. It was still really cool, and in a way it was this like kind of different experience that I had with the scene, getting to see like, cool, he's doing the Afiko thing, right, from the card game. Obviously I'm not really sure if that's completely where they got it from, but canonically that card game came out so many years before this episode was even thought about. So it's just cool that scene with that technique was used in this way, and just the fact that it is a Nickelodeon show, it still is fundamentally on Nick. It's for kids primarily, even though it's trying to do a lot more. So the fact that they could show suffocation in that way, so clearly, of just him very directly, using airbending to suck the air out of her lungs, and like what he's saying, even though they kind of censored like death and stuff like that, the core of what he's saying very clearly is getting across that you are taking freedom away from people. It's like air, I'm taking the air away from you, which is going to lead to your death, in the same way that for some people, not having freedom is the same as death. And it's definitely a good line. It's a statement of intent from this group, where like, how threatening they are before, but now they're willing to kill people, and not just any people, but very important people, and they don't care about the backlash that they're going to get for it. In that, this announcement and him actually going as far as to spread this to the entire Earth Kingdom and effectively the world, it immediately puts the Earth Kingdom in chaos, because they have Gazan take down the inner walls, which basically puts all the different classes of bossing say together, which immediately creates chaos in of itself. But then the lack of a ruler, and suddenly there's no one in control with the Dai Li taken out, and it's just pandemonium in the Earth Kingdom. They've caused complete chaos here. But what we're going to see, obviously, in the next couple of episodes is the flaw of, I suppose, Zahir's idea that this is freedom, yes, but it's freedom at like the expense of any sort of like security for certain people. And the big example we're going to get of that is Mako and Bolin's family. They're not the sort of people to go out looting and kind of forcing themselves onto other businesses and stuff like that to kind of get their way going forward. They're a nice family, and they are going to be the ones who kind of suffer for everything that's happening here. They're going to be the ones that struggle to survive in this kind of chaotic atmosphere where everything is controlled by basically the strongest people who are willing to go to the most kind of chaotic extremes. And that's the problem here, is that things are so bad here that it's obviously going to force the entire rest of the world to act to bring stability back to this. And by book 4, we find out that is Kuvira, and that's the the ultimate flaw of Zahir's idea here is that obviously I think the Red Lotus, their plan was to go much further than this, in that if they had managed to take out Korra and maybe some of the other world leaders along the way, things would be different. But I think the mistake that this book's make is never really saying what the overall plan was. And that, like, yes, they want to take out all the world leaders, but because it's never just flat out stated, like, our end goal is to accomplish this. After Korra will, I suppose at that point, like, he thinks he's killed Tonraq. He's going to kill Korra. Are they going to go after, like Zuko's daughter? Eska and Deza, they already had a chance to take out. Why didn't they do that? Raiko, like, I think it's heavily implied that that's the plan, but we never get as far as to really kind of see if that is indeed the end goal. And if they had said, I think, a little more clearly that that's what it was, I think this group would have come across a lot better. Of just them saying the threat of, like, that's one world leader down, who's next, basically, would have been, I think, so much more impactful. Of just the scene where we'll see in a couple of episodes' time with Tonraq, that would, I think, have a lot more impact if Zahir literally said, I'm going to take him out the next time I see him. And especially if you had, like, established that in the previous defense of Korra when she was younger, Tonraq fought Zahir. It would add a personal issue to that fight where Tonraq defeated Zahir before. That's why Zahir's in prison. And now he has airbending and is able to defeat and potentially kill Tonraq. That would add so much to the Zahir, Korra, Tonraq dynamic. But that's just a lot of the lack of focus development and going in depth on everything that happens with this group. But what actually happens here, this is their, in a way, the legacy of the group is what they accomplish here, plus, I suppose, what ends up happening with Korra. It's this episode directly sets up the entire plot, basically, of Book 4, with Kuvira stepping in to fix this problem that is being created right now. Again, like, I think part of the problem here is just that, like, Zuko's back in the series, but where are the White Lotus? Where's the White Lotus in all of this? And it's just very unclear. In that, like, we now know that Korra has confirmed to her father, Zuko's right there, the Red Lotus is behind this. This is what's happened, they've just killed the Earth Queen. Like, yes, to some degree everyone rallies together, but it never quite feels that, like, we get to that point where everyone is just completely on board, that they're addressing all of the plot points that have been set up here, that we're dealing with what the Red Lotus are trying to encounter, we're getting all the characters up to speed on the Red Lotus. It feels like we're just left too in the dark about the specifics of what's going on here. In that, I get it that they say that the Red Lotus never talked about what they were trying to do, but come on, like, there should be some, I think, speculation on their part for what's going on here. But yeah, that's most of the episode. We do afterwards have Zahir, in all the chaos, come into Mako and Bolin, free them, but he's given them a message to give to Korra, and this is what the next episode is about, the ultimatum. Basically, you know, we can't get to you because you're so all over the place. Come to us, or else this will happen. This is the big ultimatum that we've kind of been waiting for. That's gonna kind of draw the finale together. It's an interesting one in that, like, I think it works because it does end up kind of bringing everything back together with the threat against the Airbenders and Korra setting out to do that in the first place, to bring them back. But I think it's just a case of, like, it's set up as a mystery here, and then when it is revealed, it's like, okay, threat against the Airbenders, that makes sense, but it's not like a reveal. And I think this group is just lacking in that reveal department, and that we're going to get that reveal, then we're going to get the reveal that they want to kill Korra in the Avatar state, and none of it feels like, okay, that's interesting, but it's not really a surprise. Like, why did you feel the need to hold back on that? Because if they had just said, like, much earlier on, or came out, or someone figured it out that they want to kill Korra in the Avatar state, would it really change much compared to, like, revealing it, like, just as it's about to happen? I'm not really sure. So yeah, interesting episode. I think it's it's an episode that is, I think, just let down by its kind of B plot, the escape from the desert. Really, I think just being a bit lacking in anything. Like, you really are trying to stretch to really kind of find something that's going on here, and that, like, okay, the visuals were good, like Asami got to build some stuff, they sort of, you know, got across that they could be trusted to the crew. Otherwise it was just, you know, it gets Korra and Asami from here to here where they're needed with Zuko, Lin, and Tonraq. The other side of the episode, I think, was much, much stronger because, as I said, I feel there is a little bit more Red Lotus character here, to the point where, like, with Minghua and Gazan, you at least get a sense of their characters, even if it's only the smallest sense. But it is, I think, probably the best example of it in the book. And I just really wish we had had more of this, where, like, if we got to see just Pali talking and her personality coming across. What Zahir's personality is when he's not dealing with business. And I think that's the point I've been trying to get at for a couple of these reviews now, is that Zahir as a character, I think, is so incorporated into the Red Lotus that you almost don't get any of his personality, his character, what it actually is, because it's just him executing the ideals of the Red Lotus without really, like, okay, he likes poetry, but you really haven't established, like, who he was kind of before this kind of book 3 kind of incident happened. And that's where I think he falls a bit short. But of course, there's probably the biggest piece of character coming up with the Pali Zahir relationship in just a few episodes. But yeah, there's not too much longer to go in the book 3 rewatch, but we're getting to some of the really high intensity stuff that I think for sure is what book 3 does well. It definitely knows how to do action scenes, and especially it feels like the one thing that they gave to the Red Lotus that kind of puts them, makes them feel unique, is that they really were not afraid to have the Red Lotus do some very, very big things. Really threaten the lives of characters, kill characters, be just full-on dangerous, in that all of the villains are dangerous. Amon, more or less, you know, like, again, there's some debate about it, but, like, he kills the lieutenant, and he's threatening. Like, his ability is just so dangerous that he's a threat to anyone. And the murder-suicide thing at the end of book 1. Similarly, Unalaq, like, the threat of him, like, basically destroying, like, Jinora or Korra's soul, the brutal attack on his brother and stuff like that. Like, they get the other villains across as being powerful, but they don't quite go as far as to just kind of have the other two, like, just flat out, you know, kill someone and really just get across their power. Because, like, the lieutenant thing happens kind of in secret, like, it's not public, whereas this feels like they just came in there, took out all of the Dai Li, who we know how powerful they are, and just asserted their dominance by killing the Earth Queen, getting across that they don't like world leaders, we've just killed one. That's the strength, and in that sense, like, that's where I understand the love of these villains. But if it's just based on, like, this one scene here and the fact that they're willing to go to extremes, that's where I have a bit of a problem, because I prefer to actually know the characters in addition to know that they're threats. It's, I suppose, the difference between, like, with the Avatar villains. It's like Ozai is the main threat, but purely because by the end he is this, like, physical threat. He's just the villain because we've more or less been told he's the villain. We don't really care all that much about his personality of Ozai, whereas, like, with Azula, her personality is what really gets her across as being, I think, really, really interesting, because you can have sympathy for her, or you can kind of be like, no, she had a choice to make, and you cannot have that sympathy, but maybe understand why people do. And there's depth to what's going on there. Like similarly with Long Feng, like not the biggest villain, but like there's substance to what's going on. Like Zhao, again, you get the idea of the power that he wants, and him seeing like Zuko as a rival, doing everything to put him down, to build up his position. There's character that comes across there. Here, I think they leaned a bit too hard on the fact that this group would be got across by doing extreme actions, by being terrorists, basically, without properly, I think, developing them as characters. Which, again, like, we're 10 episodes into a 13-episode book, and this was the first time to get characterization for really the group, with some of the kind of one-on-one conversation scenes here. And similarly with the Korra stuff, like, we're 10 episodes in, and there's been, like, what, one scene this book where you can maybe say that, like, they really did something interesting with the two of them. Otherwise, it's just they've kind of been paired up as like a group for this, as a duo for most of this book. They've been in scenes with each other for a lot, but there hasn't actually been a lot of real takeaways from those scenes. But in the comments, let me know what your thoughts are on this episode and what I had to say here in the review. But yeah, that's been the video for today. Thanks for watching, and bye.